Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Why narcissists often prefer online relationships. Now, if you've ever had an experience where someone seems to thrive in an online relationship but struggles when it comes to face-to-face interactions, chances are you might have been dealing with a narcissist. But what exactly makes the online world such an appealing place for them? Is it the control, the lack of accountability, or maybe the ability to curate a perfect image? Well, it's actually a bit of all those things. Let's break it down, using insights from psychological studies, expert opinions, and even examples from daily life, to help us understand why narcissists are so drawn to online relationships and how they manage to thrive in them, at least for a while. First, let's clarify what we're talking about when we say narcissist. Narcissism is characterized by traits like grandiosity, a constant need for admiration, and a lack of empathy. But narcissism isn't one size fits all. There are actually two major types: grandiose narcissism and vulnerable narcissism. Grandiose narcissists are the people who seem overly confident and believe they are superior to everyone else, whereas vulnerable narcissists often feel insecure and crave validation, but still believe they are somehow unique or special. Both types have a hard time forming deep, meaningful relationships because their focus is more on how others see them than on genuine emotional connection. So why does this make online relationships so attractive to them? Well, the answer lies in the power of control and the ability to create an idealized version of themselves. Let's start with social media, which has become the perfect stage for narcissists to present their best selves. A recent study published found that narcissists are much more likely than others to use social media for self-promotion. Think about all the selfies, the perfectly crafted posts, the updates about accomplishments. It's not just a casual habit for narcissists, it's a necessity. They thrive on external validation, and social media gives them the perfect platform to receive it. According to Dr. Laura Boffardi, social media platforms allow narcissists to create idealized images of themselves, filtering out imperfections and presenting only what garners the most admiration. This is key to understanding why online relationships work so well for narcissists. The online world lets them control how they are perceived by others in a way that's nearly impossible to achieve in face-to-face interactions. In real life, people can pick up on body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice, things that can give away insecurities or flaws that narcissists work so hard to hide. But online, they can manage every little detail of how they're seen. But it's not just about the ability to post filtered selfies or brag about achievements. Narcissists are also drawn to online relationships because of the control these platforms give them over how much intimacy they allow. Dr. W. Keith Campbell, a leading expert on narcissism, explains that online spaces offer narcissists the ability to project confidence while avoiding the vulnerabilities that come with real-life interactions. In real-world relationships, people eventually expect a deeper level of emotional intimacy, and that's where narcissists tend to struggle. They avoid empathy-driven connections because they're uncomfortable with vulnerability, which threatens the carefully curated image they've built. A study from the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology showed that narcissists prefer environments where they can control the flow of information, and that's exactly what online relationships provide. They can engage when they want, ghost someone when things get too emotional or uncomfortable, and come back when it suits them. They're able to keep relationships at a surface level, which allows them to maintain the admiration and validation they crave without having to risk the emotional exposure that comes with genuine intimacy. Speaking of ghosting, it's one of the most common tactics narcissists use to maintain control in online relationships. Have you ever been texting someone for weeks, maybe even months, and then suddenly they disappear without a trace? That's a classic narcissistic move, and it's all about avoiding accountability. In real-life relationships, if you lie, manipulate, or avoid emotional closeness, eventually the other person will confront you. But online, narcissists can simply vanish when things get too real, too fast. Dr. Craig Malkin, another expert on narcissism, explains, narcissists rely on control to protect their fragile sense of self, and by keeping others at a distance, they can avoid the discomfort that comes with vulnerability. Ghosting isn't just about avoiding conflict. It's a way for narcissists to regain control of the situation. By disappearing, they leave the other person wondering what went wrong, often blaming themselves, and seeking closure that the narcissist never provides. It's a manipulative tactic that keeps the narcissist in power while avoiding any real emotional responsibility. This brings us to the topic of self-promotion and the constant need for validation. A 2022 survey found that individuals with high narcissistic traits post 38% more selfies than the average person. But it's not just about selfies. Narcissists also post about their accomplishments, lifestyle, and anything else that might bring them attention and admiration. Every like, every comment, every share, it's all fuel for their ego. But here's the kicker. This constant need for validation is never really satisfied. Social media creates a feedback loop where narcissists crave more and more admiration but never feel truly fulfilled. As Dr. Buffardi puts it, social media platforms allow narcissists to create idealized images of themselves, filtering out imperfections and presenting only what garners the most admiration. The more validation they get, the more they need, and the cycle continues. Now, let's talk about intimacy, or rather, the lack of it. One of the main reasons narcissists avoid real-world relationships is because true emotional intimacy requires vulnerability, empathy, and mutual trust, things that don't come easily to them. But online, they can keep things at a surface level. They can maintain their digital mask, showing only the parts of themselves they want others to see while keeping their insecurities and flaws hidden. A study from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that narcissists tend to avoid empathy-driven emotional intimacy, which is harder to fake in real life but easier to manage in online spaces. This means they can keep relationships shallow and transactional, getting the admiration they need without having to deal with the emotional messiness that comes with deeper connections. So, what happens in the long run? While online relationships might work for narcissists in the short term, providing them with control, admiration, and a way to avoid vulnerability, these relationships are often shallow and unfulfilling. Over time, this lack of emotional depth can leave narcissists feeling isolated, even if they're surrounded by admirers online. Dr. Malkin explains that while narcissists rely on control to maintain their self-image, this strategy ultimately isolates them from the emotional support and connection they need to feel fulfilled. They might have hundreds of followers, thousands of likes, and an endless stream of online admirers, but none of that can replace the deep emotional bonds that come from real-life relationships. Let's take a real-life example. Imagine you've got a friend who seems to be the life of the party online. They're constantly posting pictures of their amazing life, getting tons of likes, and always talking about their accomplishments. But when you hang out with them in person, they seem disengaged. They talk about themselves but don't really listen when you share your thoughts. They're constantly checking their phone, more interested in their online persona than the real-life connection right in front of them. This is a prime example of a narcissist who is more invested in their online image than in their real-life relationships. Online, they get everything they need: validation, admiration, control, but in person, they struggle to connect emotionally, leaving both them and their friends feeling isolated. Now, let's talk about vulnerable narcissists, who are a bit different from their grandiose counterparts, but still use online spaces in similar ways. Vulnerable narcissists often present themselves as humble or even self-deprecating, but deep down, they still crave admiration and control over how they're perceived. They might post vague status updates or pictures that invite concern or attention from others, fishing for compliments or validation. A study from the Journal of Clinical Psychology found that vulnerable narcissists are more likely to engage in passive-aggressive behavior online, using indirect means to get the attention they crave. It's a different approach from grandiose narcissists, but the goal is the same: to get validation without having to show real vulnerability. So, what does the future look like for narcissism and online relationships? As we become more and more connected through social media and digital communication, it's likely that narcissistic behavior will become even more prevalent. Social media platforms are designed in a way that encourages self-promotion and rewards engagement, which plays right into the hands of narcissists. In fact, research published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health found that social media can amplify narcissistic traits by rewarding self-promotion and providing a constant stream of validation. The more likes, the more attention, the more they post. It creates a feedback loop that reinforces their behavior, and the cycle continues. But there's also a downside to all of this, even for the narcissists themselves. Research shows that relying on social media for validation can have negative impacts on mental health, especially for those with narcissistic traits. They might feel great in the moment when they receive likes and attention on their posts, but this sense of validation is often fleeting, leaving them needing more and more external approval to maintain their self-esteem. This constant need for validation can lead to anxiety and depression, when their posts don't receive the expected level of engagement. A study published in Cyberpsychology, Behavior and Social Networking found that individuals with high levels of narcissism were more likely to experience negative emotions, such as depression, when their social media interactions didn't provide the validation they were seeking. This creates a cycle where they continuously seek out admiration, but the emotional high they get from it never lasts long enough to bring true satisfaction. Now, let's take a step back and consider how online dating has become the perfect environment for narcissists to thrive. Dating apps like Tinder, Bumble, and Hinge have revolutionized how we form romantic connections, but they've also become the ideal stage for narcissists to present a carefully curated version of themselves. A narcissist's online dating profile is often a reflection of their ideal self, filled with perfectly edited photos, boastful descriptions of their lifestyle, and crafted in a way that will attract as much admiration as possible. They excel in the early stages of dating, where conversations are often superficial and focused on creating attraction. However, as the relationship moves offline, the cracks start to appear. Narcissists struggle to maintain the charm they exude online once the relationship demands emotional vulnerability. According to a study published in Personality and Individual Differences, individuals with narcissistic traits often struggle to maintain romantic relationships because they avoid emotional intimacy. They're great at the initial chase, but once real emotions are involved, they lose interest or disengage. And it's not just grandiose narcissists who use online spaces for their benefit. Vulnerable narcissists, who tend to be more insecure and prone to anxiety, also find solace in the anonymity and control of online relationships. Unlike grandiose narcissists, vulnerable narcissists are more likely to present themselves as victims or seek reassurance through passive-aggressive behavior, such as posting vague status updates or fishing for compliments. But at the end of the day, the goal is the same: to get validation and admiration without exposing their true selves. Vulnerable narcissists often struggle with feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt, but rather than addressing these issues head-on, they use online relationships to mask their insecurities and keep others at a safe emotional distance. So, where does this leave us? As social media and online communication continue to dominate our lives, it's likely that narcissistic behaviors will only become more prevalent. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook encourage self-promotion and reward users with likes, comments, and shares, creating an environment that's perfect for narcissists to thrive in. These platforms give narcissists the tools they need to maintain control, avoid vulnerability, and constantly seek validation. But while the digital world might seem like the perfect playground for narcissists, it comes at a cost. The lack of genuine emotional connection and the superficial nature of online relationships leave narcissists feeling isolated and unfulfilled in the long run. In conclusion, narcissists are drawn to online relationships because they offer the perfect environment for control, self-promotion, and avoidance of emotional intimacy. While the digital world allows them to maintain their grandiose self-image and avoid vulnerability, it ultimately leads to shallow and unsatisfying relationships. As social media continues to play a central role in our lives, it's important to recognize these patterns of behavior and understand the impact they can have on both the narcissist and those around them. Whether it's through ghosting, self-promotion, or avoiding accountability, narcissists use online spaces to mask their insecurities and maintain control. But in the end, the emotional fulfillment they seek can only come from genuine, real-world connections, something that the digital world, with all its convenience and control, just can't provide. Thank you for sticking around till the end. If you found this discussion insightful, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more deep dives into human behavior and relationships. And hey, let me know in the comments. Have you ever experienced a relationship with someone who seemed perfect online, but was totally different in person? I'd love to hear your stories.